Welcome, everyone, to the September 1st, 2015 special meeting of the Glendale City Council, being held in the Brand Library and Arts Center in beautiful Northwest Glendale. This is one of a continuing series of City Council meetings in your neighborhood, started last year under the tenure of then Mayor Sinanyan, and it was well received. We are going to continue this throughout the year as well. May we have the roll call?
Council members Devine.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Barfetian.
Here.
Sinanian.
Here.
Mayor Najarian.
Here. May we have your report?
The agenda for the September 1st, 2015 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Thursday, August 27, 2015 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Mr. Mayor and council members, let me just quickly read over just briefly what the items will be, and I'm sure the city manager and staff will go over each one in detail. But nothing. First is you're welcome, followed by pedestrian presentations on pedestrian and traffic safety, water conservation, on upcoming infrastructure projects, and West Glendale community plan. Thank you.
Thank you. We will be dispensing with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes.
At this special meeting, that's correct, sir.
Okay.
Unless you would like to.
Is there a flag that we may stand and address? There's rules. If there's no flag
North, I believe, sir.
to the north, are you our parliamentarian as well? Let's all rise and recite the pledge together, and let's face the north. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, would you like to do an impromptu
Why not?
invocation?
If everyone will please rise for the invocation. This evening we pray for the continued health and vitality of our city. We give thanks for the citizens who give freely of their time in support of this community. We pray for the safety of those who serve and protect our great nation, as well as pray for the safe return of our men and women serving overseas. Let us reflect on all that we have been given as citizens and residents of this fair city, this jewel city, and actively seek ways to give back. We pray for all this, and that our council and community be guided by the principles of fairness and cooperation during this evening's special meeting and always. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, at the risk of being redundant, let me again welcome you to the City Hall in your neighborhood. This is a slightly different format for tonight's meeting. It's rather streamlined and focused on several important issues that we wanted to bring to your attention. And in that regard, our typical public comment period, which we hold at the end of City Council, during which you're allowed to address any subject that's not on the agenda, will be dispensed with today. However, I do encourage you, if you have any comments to make relating to the 4 items which are on our agenda, please feel free to fill out a card and pass it to our city clerk, and we'll have those comments at the end of each of the individual presentations. And I have a request from Mr. Sinanyan to address an important issue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for entertaining my request. Also, thank you for continuing what now appears to be a tradition of holding City Council in your neighborhood hearings. I think it's very important that our residents recognize that their involvement and their presence at City Council meetings, them bringing their issues to us, is very, very important for us, and will facilitate that for them as much as possible. But today I want to request support from my colleagues for the Clean Energy and Pollution Reduction Act of 2015. Now that's it takes two shapes. One is Senate Bill 350, which has already passed the Senate, and our support at this point wouldn't necessarily make a difference, but the same bill is in the Assembly as Assembly Bill 32, and this bill is setting very, very laudable and very important goals for the year 2030 in terms of reducing our use of petroleum and becoming more energy efficient. And our friends in the Assembly need support from local government in order to make it pass. And I can give details on this bill, but I'm sure my colleagues are very aware of this bill since it's been around in Senate form, SB 350 since February. It's Senate President Pro Tem's Kevin DeLeon's bill, and the difficulty that we face right now, and I want to first I want to know if any of my colleagues support this bill.
I do. I second.
Okay, thank you. And the problem is the State Assembly is going to be out of session as of the end of September 9th of this year, and we're not going to have another council meeting until then. So the way to pass a resolution, the only way, I assume, unless staff tells me otherwise, would be a special meeting, which I'm not sure technically how would we make that happen?
If it's been moved and seconded to put it on the agenda, we can bring it back on the 15th.
It'll be too late.
When's the date? Oh, because
September 9th.
Yeah, that would be the only way.
May I suggest that the city council members feel free to individually sign a letter of support because we're looking at that September 9th deadline.
Yes.
And to join on it without having official action as a council because of our time.
Based just on the information that we have and the overview provided by Councilman Sinanian and the idea that this fits within the City Council's established platform in terms of our legislative calendar, we can and will, under that understanding, provide a letter to the Assembly signed by the mayor, prepared for your signature, as is our practice. So the council, as you know, adopts a platform at the beginning. Sustainability, environmental preservation is part of that platform, and so this would fit very well with that. We will provide that to you in the coming day.
That would be great. So this letter will go out before, I'm hoping sometime this week.
It will go out, if not tomorrow, at the very latest by Thursday.
Okay, very well. Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Let's move right along. Mr. Ochoa, would you please introduce the first presenter?
Yes, sir. We have a number of items that are of importance to especially the folks up here in Northwest. And so leading off our lineup will be our police chief, Rob Castro, to talk about traffic safety. And he'll be tag teaming this topic with our public works director, Mr. Golanian, who will talk about some pedestrian safety programs. Chief?
Thank you very much. So the purpose of my presentation tonight is to bring us up to date on some of the traffic enforcement and traffic safety plans and efforts that we have been accomplishing here in Glendale. Also, at the end, I will show where we're kind of at right now, and it's actually some good news. We are trending in a positive way, which leads us to believe that although there is a lot of work to be done in terms of traffic safety in our community, we are making some progress through our efforts. With me today is also a group of our special enforcement detail officers. These are officers that their sole job is to go out in the community and solve problems for us. So they don't handle traditional calls for service, and instead what they do is each day they get a different mission to go out, and it might be traffic safety, it could be burglaries, it could be any number of quality of life issues, and that's what they do. And they're here tonight to help support me, listen to some of the things that we talk about, and it also helps them in doing their job by not only understanding the needs of the police department, but also as my colleagues speak about what they're doing in their respective areas. So recently what we did is we first wanted to identify what are we really looking at right now. So we conducted a very comprehensive 6-year traffic analysis identifying a whole host of issues for the last 6 years involving traffic collisions in Glendale, identifying the demographics for drivers and pedestrians, identifying whether the drivers or pedestrians involved in collisions are residents of Glendale, visitors of Glendale, or do they work in our community, so we could really decide how we are going to target our original safety plan. We conduct every week pedestrian and traffic accident analysis. So we look at what are the top locations, what are the causes of those collisions, and then we work with our public works director and the traffic engineers to find out, are there engineering issues that need to be addressed? or is it just enforcement, or is it educational component? So that's done weekly now. Traffic enforcement is woven into the everyday life of the members of the Glendale Police Department. It's one of our top priorities, and it's something that we never, ever stop analyzing and looking at what we can do with. We've been really going out in the community and partnering to make presentations. We've done 12 different community presentations throughout the community and workshops. One of those was done just last month here in this same building where Steve Zern and I spoke on water issues and traffic safety for Northwest Glendale. We're using and deploying our mobile traffic signs to identify some of the hot spots and warn people of different areas where we're seeing continuous traffic accidents so that hopefully we can bring that awareness so people will slow down, remind them that there are areas that for many reasons are higher incidents of traffic accidents. Many of them are along the freeways where there's a lot of traffic getting on and off, as well as traversing through the city through those intersections. We've produced several public service announcements that have been played throughout the community. Many of our churches, business groups have used these public safety PSAs to help educate their residents, their members of their churches, as well as people that work for them about some of the issues that are occurring to continue to keep the dialogue up front about slowing down, trying to pay attention as you're driving. One of our biggest things is getting people to not be so distracted. Cars nowadays, technology nowadays, makes it very tempting for motorists to look at that phone, to make entries into the GPS, or to do a host of different technologies that are now out there. One thing that's kind of made it a little more difficult for us is there was a challenge to the hands-free phones law, and one of the court rulings was that if you're using your phone for GPS purposes, then it's okay. So now we have a lot of people that when we stop them for using their phone, they're claiming they're using it in the GPS mode as a mapping system, which sometimes makes it a little more difficult for us to enforce the hands-free law. So I get a lot of comments from people saying, I see people with their phones constantly. That's one thing that's made it a little more difficult for us to enforce the hands-free phone laws. Whether that will continue to be the case, we don't know. There may be some additional catch-up legislation to correct that deficiency in the law right now. Already this year, we've conducted 45 pedestrian driving enforcement educational operations. That's where our officers go out and enforce traffic laws for the violations that are causing accidents in the areas that we've identified where they're happening. But they used a balanced approach of not only issuing citations, but also issuing warnings, and again, working with our traffic engineers to determine if there are roadway issues that we can address to make these particular intersections safer. This year alone, we've already written 8,000 traffic citations for drivers and pedestrians. One of the questions I commonly get is, I think we need more enforcement. And we do. We balance the enforcement with warnings at times, so without victimizing the members of our community also. So it's a balanced approach, a holistic approach in terms of trying to get people to change their driving behaviors that are causing accidents. And we do our enforcement and education components against all the people that share the road: pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, as well as motorists. Everybody gets the same amount of attention so that those behaviors are across the board are hopefully being changed so that we can reduce the number of accidents in our community. Some of our future efforts that we're continuing to do on a weekly basis is expand our community partnerships. This is absolutely an issue that is a community-wide issue. The police department alone will not be able to have significant ongoing impacts on traffic safety if we don't have a community that is willing to help us in making those behavioral changes. Be it with talking about it at home with kids, talking about pedestrian safety with our parents who are out walking and visiting the parks and the different centers throughout the community. So we are really working with community groups and partnerships to help us. We've had great support from, again, local churches, schools, businesses, as well as working with all other stakeholders that want to come forward to help us out and spread our message. We've done presentations in multiple languages to reach out to some of the demographics that we identified. Early on, we had identified that a high incident rate of pedestrian fatalities were our seniors who were of Armenian descent. And so we truly targeted that group to try to make some changes. And as you'll see, it has been effective. It has been effective to go out and do these educational programs to the different groups to help us understand. And sometimes people don't understand the traffic laws, or they don't understand some of the traffic signals and what they actually mean. So what we've been seeing over the last year is actually a reduction. We are seeing some positive trends in terms of reducing. We've had a 7% reduction in pedestrian collisions. We've also had a 3% reduction in injury accidents, and we've had a reduction in our fatalities also. So we are seeing positive results. We believe that the efforts that we are doing, the outreach that we are doing, the support that we are receiving from the City Council in terms of your support, for instance, in adding additional funding for our bicycle patrol officers. Those officers that go out each week on bicycles have a huge impact on all kinds of this traffic safety components, because they can do enforcement and educational components for pedestrians and motorists alike, and they can get around the congested area of the community much easier than perhaps our cars can, and sometimes even better than our police motorcycles that are out there. So we're optimistic about this. We still have a lot of work to do. This trend, we hope, will continue. I can tell you that it's taken a great deal of energy and effort by the members of our department and by all the other city departments that are all working together to make sure that we're constantly employing different strategies that can help us educate, change the behaviors, and reduce these number of accidents that we're having. But we haven't seen a trend like this in several years, so we are really focusing on continuing our efforts as they appear that they are having some positive impacts. One of the things that we are doing is continually going out and finding ways that we can help raise awareness. These were some of our slap bands that are reflective, and we found that sometimes a lot of our pedestrians at night were out wearing clothing that didn't have any reflective nature at all, and they weren't being seen by the cars. So this is something we do. We do it in multiple languages. We get kids wear them. We get seniors to wear them. And it's, again, just keeping that message alive that traffic safety is a major priority for our community. And again, this is not an issue that's only going to be solved by the city and our efforts. We truly need partnerships with our community. We are sharing this message as this is a community problem. We need to help change behaviors for drivers that are causing the accidents. We're also seeing that a lot of our drivers that were involved in collisions aren't Glendale residents. So we're trying to identify where do they work, where do they travel, so that we can get the word out to those members that visit our community, that work in our community and shop here, that traffic safety is something that's everybody's role to start to change behaviors, to slow down, and to not be distracted when they're driving. It's that few extra seconds. If we could just take that time, we are going to continue to see the positive impacts that we are seeing thus far. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our Public Works Director, and he will share some of the ideas and some of the progress we're making in terms of the engineering components of this program.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. As Chief Castro mentioned, pedestrian and traffic safety has been at the front and center of the Public Works and as well as the Police Department's efforts in alignment with your strategic goal of safe and healthy community. As such, per your direction, we formed the Glendale Pedestrian Safety Task Force in October of 2013 as a subcommittee to the Transportation and Parking Commission. The participation in the committee was broad and diverse, cross-section of community members, representatives from several city departments and other agencies such as GUSD, and 2 commission boards. Since then, we've had 2 community workshops, several brainstorming sessions, and we have generated 20 recommendations that were presented to City Council in October of 2014. With your approval to move forward, we have been working at implementing some of those recommendations throughout the city, but more specifically at so-called hotspots. The recommendations were divided into 3 groups. Chief Castro already covered enforcement and education, and I will talk about the traffic engineering elements of those recommendations. I'd like also to add that back in March of this year, at the first City Council meeting at your neighborhood, then Mayor Sinanian joined other mayors across the nation in issuing a challenge, a year-long challenge for Safer People and Safer Streets initiative that we have been working at. So what have we done in Northwest Glendale to date? We have made certain traffic signal modifications by replacing the old signal lights with brighter LED technology that are far more visible and have a longer lasting life. We have upgraded the safety lighting at the intersections, again with LED lights. These are the lights that go on top of the traffic signal poles for better illumination of the intersections. We have added protected left turn phasing at certain locations when possible. We have installed video detection cameras on the traffic signal mast arms. We have also included and added bicycle detectors in the pavement before the intersections. In addition to traffic safety improvements that these have allowed, they've also helped us for an improved signal coordination and synchronization for better traffic flow on those streets. The locations that we have completed these works are Glen Oaks Boulevard and Western Avenue, the intersection of San Fernando Road and Western Avenue, as well as the Sonora Avenue and Flower Street.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can you go back one slide?
Absolutely.
Can you explain that video detection camera and bicycle detectors? How does that work?
Thank you, Councilmember Garpetian. This is the latest technology that replaces the old inlaid in the pavement loop detectors. The video detection works as trigger for turning the signals when there are vehicles at an intersection and there are no crossing vehicles. It used to be inlaid in pavement. They were called loop detectors. That's old technology. Now we are using video detection.
And that's used for traffic count?
Yes.
Okay.
Not for traffic count, for preempting lights, traffic signal lights.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Here's a picture of the completed work at San Fernando Road and Western Avenue. You see the video detection camera on the mast arm. You see a portion of the safety lighting on top of the power pole and the very bright LED lights, the green lights. We have also installed several digital radar speed display signage. Studies have shown that these signs encourage drivers to reduce speeds and create traffic safety awareness for motorists. We have installed these on the 1500 block of Grandview, 1200 block of Highland, 1200 block of Western Avenue, as well as the 1300 block of Western Avenue. Here's a picture of the radar speed display sign. This is posted on a power pole, mounted on a power pole. As Chief Castro noted, the police department have also deployed similar signs on trailers on streets that we were not able to find a suitable pole to post on. One of the recommendations of the task force was high visibility zebra crosswalks. These are the newest standards for crosswalks that increase the contrast between the crosswalk markings and the pavement background. In turn, this improves visibility and hence pedestrian safety. We have also installed signs stating turning vehicles yield to pedestrians to remind motorists to yield to pedestrians before turning. These installations have taken place at the intersection of Glen Oaks Boulevard and Western Avenue, as well as San Fernando Road and Sonora Avenue. Again, here's a picture of the completed work at San Fernando Road and Sonora Avenue. You see the high visibility zebra crosswalks at all 4 legs of the intersection. You see the bicycle detectors in the pavement before the crosswalk, as well as the sign that says turning vehicle yield to pedestrians. Based on the police department's statistics over the last 10 years, the intersection of Glen Oaks Boulevard and Western Avenue was ranked as having the highest number of pedestrian accidents. And as part of this year's budget process, the City Council appropriated special funds to make certain traffic safety, pedestrian safety improvements at 6 intersections with the highest rates of pedestrian accidents, and Glen Oaks and Weston was on top of that list. So we have recently completed certain modifications to the median opening that staggers the crosswalk and encourages pedestrians to cross half of Glen Oaks Boulevard in each signal cycle at a time. We had noted in the past that some pedestrians were trying to run all the way across, trying to beat the walk signal meter.
But Rubik?
Yes.
I don't know if this is on or off. I do think that, I know that you can't put any barrier in that's going to really stop a car, and you don't want to create a false impression, but as somebody who walks a lot, it's very uncomfortable to stand in the middle of those medians when you've got traffic on both sides if you're going at 50 miles an hour. And that's one of the reasons people run across. So I do think we need to put something there to make people feel less exposed to the traffic whizzing by on both sides. This is a fairly wide median because of the engineering you've done, but most of them don't have that long expanse to stand on. On some of them, you're standing in an area that's so narrow you could put your hands out and touch the traffic. And if you're there with other people, it really is a scary feeling. So I think we need to look at all of those medians and really make sure that they feel safer somehow with some kind of barriers in the front and on the sides.
That's a very good point, Councilmember Friedman. We are going to give this staggered crosswalk some time to see if pedestrians follow the rule, but we are also looking at an installation of perhaps railings or delineator so that they will feel it's like a refuge landing for them before they cross the other leg.
I think you need that, and we've talked before about allowing people to cross when the arrow is turning on Glen Oaks, which would allow you in some locations to get all the way across on one signal.
Correct.
So that hasn't been done yet, and I think it's important. And because of that, even though the hands up, because people know they can get to the middle because there's an arrow on the other side, they're jaywalking because they don't want to stand in the middle of Glen Oaks with the traffic on both sides. So I really would appreciate someone taking a look at that. I don't see any reason why they can't have the ability to walk when there's the arrow going the other side of the street.
Absolutely.
Okay,
We'll take
thanks.
a closer look. So with that, I wanted to continue talking about our citywide pedestrian safety action plan. We are currently in the process of selecting a consultant team to help us put this plan together. Incidentally, this was one of the task force's recommendations. The plan will provide for a multimodal and comprehensive approach to pedestrian safety throughout the city. It will have components for improvements to additional pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. It will focus on targeted community outreach and will enable us to evaluate our current policies and guidelines. Along with that, I wanted to say that staff has applied and was successful in receiving active transportation program grant funds that's enable us to put this plan together, which a component of it is safety education initiative that Chief Castro already has embarked on that initiative, and including the Safe Route to School program. The focus is going to be on education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation, commonly known as 4Es. This will provide for a consolidated and coordinated existing educational programs. It will help us find ways to teach residents the proper rules of the road for every transportation mode. It will also have potentially an enhanced multimodal driver education, more specifically for our younger drivers. It will have strategies to create events promoting safe walking and bicycling. and also provide an design an awareness campaign that we can use with traditional and social media platforms. And as far as the school children are concerned, it will encourage increased walking and bicycling for students. I think that concludes my presentation. I think Chief Castro and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any, let's see, any comments by council? Ms. Devine.
Mr. Galania, do you have any plans in the future to increase the number of those warning signs, turning vehicles, yield to pedestrians? I was just on Broadway in Maryland the other day, and it seems that the drivers, when they get to the red light, they just keep on going to make the right turn, and a gal just stepped off the curb, and if one of them would have been a second slower or faster, there would have been an accident. Because drivers just are not stopping at the red lights on corners, they just proceed. So these signs maybe are good warning signs. Do you have any plans on putting those in more places?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Council Member Devine, initially our focus area is going to be downtown Glendale, and we have done some work at the hot spots, but we are planning on installation of several of these yield to pedestrians before turning signs throughout the downtown, and then any opportunity that we have with other larger projects, the rest of the city.
Great, great. And I wanted to let the chief know, and I mentioned this last week at council, that, was it last week or the week before, that I was down in the city the weekend before and saw some of the bicycle police, and they were talking to pedestrians. And I thought that was such a good thing to see them out and about. So I know that they're doing their job. And I also want to say that I'm still carrying those snap bands in my car. And so when I'm driving at night and I see couples or someone walking, I try to stop and throw one at them and say, put this on, because they're great. They're very helpful. So thank you both for what you're doing.
Mr. Garvetia.
Yes. I believe that we identified the most dangerous intersections in the city, about 5 or 7 of them. And I think it would be very important to include those in our presentations, especially when we meet with the community groups, the seniors or what have you. So they would know that this is the dangerous intersection they're crossing, they will be more cautious. I know we have identified them, so let's include them in our presentations as well.
Mr. Sinani?
Mr. Mayor, I want to thank the Police Department of Public Works for the hard work that they've done on this issue. As Chief Castro indicated, a lot of resources have been spent on this, but as the statistical information suggests, the resources appear to have been spent well. I know that on traffic safety, we have this emotional roller coaster with periods of lulls where there are no accidents or major fatal accidents, followed by like a spree of such accidents. I'm hoping that the statistical information that we have last year compared to the year before is more of a trend than sort of a happenstance low ebb of the flow. In terms of the medians, we all recognize it's a problem, people trying to dash across wide streets, and that causes problems. One thing that West Hollywood has done is they've installed public art in those medians as a means of slowing down traffic, because willy-nilly people, the drivers look at it, and also slowing down the pedestrians, because it's not a vacuum. The medium is not an empty space that you just dash across. All of a sudden, it's an exhibit. There's something to look at, and apparently it's worked for them. So it serves two purposes. One is hopefully slows down those pedestrians who are in a rush to cross, and secondly, God forbid, we'll have more art, public art on the streets. How about that?
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Friedman?
Thanks for presenting all this work. And we know this has been a huge push for many years in the city because we do have this traffic safety problem. I think for this area, the biggest thing I see, and I live in this neighborhood, is the incredible amount of speeding on streets, many of which are narrow and don't have sidewalks. And people also rolling stop signs in an unsafe way, or just ignoring stop signs completely and blowing through them. And, it's a week doesn't go past that another street doesn't send an email. Someone on another street sends an email saying there's speeding on my street. And it's a problem, and we're doing the enforcement, and I saw just today that there were officers on Kenneth watching people stop or not stop at stop signs, and I was glad to see that, and I was glad that I had come to a complete stop, even though I didn't see the officers. And people do, because they know that there's more enforcement, and when people expect to see enforcement, they behave much, much better. And having those speed limit reminders is also good, because sometimes people just honestly don't know that they're going 35 instead of 25. But there's still an incredible amount of aggressive driving. I mean, I notice that if I'm going 25 on Kenneth, which is the speed limit, it's probably every other day that someone's tailgating me and impatiently almost trying to push me out of the way. I've had people pass me on Kenneth, and just angrily kind of speed by. And, there's definitely something going on out there with people just really feeling that wherever they're going. Sometimes I wonder, is there like someone giving birth in that car? I mean, is there something happening? But no, there's just too much of it going on. It's not that. And we need to find ways also of reaching those people, because a lot of what we're doing is targeting the people who are the law-abiding people, who maybe make a mistake every now and then or just aren't paying attention. But there's also people that are really bad actors. And I hope that with those people that are doing the 55s on our back roads or zooming around at night with their friends, that we find a way to really step up enforcement and send a message to them. And taking someone's car, taking someone's license who's egregious, who's doing something egregious or who's caught multiple times, I hope that we look at those tools too, because there are some people that aren't going to be convinced by our education campaign.
One of the recent things that we've done in that same area is realizing that we do have a limited amount of resources that we can put throughout this city, is we are now using some of our non-sworn cadets and some of our volunteers to go to areas where we are getting reports of high incidents of speeding or violations. They're taking photographs of the cars. We're mailing out letters to those registered owners. Sometimes we find they don't live in town, sometimes they do. Last month when I was up here, we passed around a sheet, and we had members of this community submit 25 different areas for different problems that they're having, and we are targeting those areas. But we're not only using our sworn assets, we're also using the community. People are sending us photographs they're taking with their smartphones of cars committing violations. Again, we run those addresses on those cars, and we're sending them warning letters that, thank you for visiting Glendale, but your vehicle was observed committing whatever violation. And sometimes I get phone calls back from people saying, thank you, my son was in the car that day, or it was my daughter, or it's the wife saying it was my husband, I sent him out for milk, but now I chastised him for continuing to do that. So it's another way that we're reaching out in a kind of a non-traditional way, but because everybody's got a cell phone camera now, we encourage people to send us violations that they see, because it helps us to get that message out to those areas and people that frequent those particular streets you're talking about.
Thank you.
Thanks. So going back to my question about public art on the medians, is there someone want to comment on it?
The timing is outstanding because the Arts and Culture Commission is preparing next year's work plan, and as you point out, they do have resources through the art in lieu fees. So they are constantly looking for new ways, especially on a smaller scale, to invest those dollars in ways that are high profile. So we will bring that right back to them, and the council will see that probably in the next month or so in terms of the work plan coming back to you.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to it.
I do have a card from a public speaker, Natalie Winiarski. Can give you 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Natalie Winiarski. I'm with Walk Bike Glendale, and I would like to invite the community to a free kids bike safety and skills workshop being held on Saturday, September 12th from 10 to 2 at the Pacific Community Center. And this is brought to you by Walk by Glendale received a Dignity Health grant, a community grant, and we are choosing to have this free workshop to the community. It is in partnership with Glendale Glendale Community Services and Parks, and Glendale Healthy Kids, and Glendale Community Free Health Clinic. So we invite everyone to please spread the word, come out, have fun, get some exercise, and kids will be able to learn how to safely ride their bikes, start and stop their bikes properly, avoid hazards, yielding, a proper helmet fit, and a bike check. And we will be distributing free helmets while supplies last, and free educational materials. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there an age limit to?
Kids, basically, as long as they can push around on a push bike, just a bike without any pedals, as long as they can push those, we're fine, and up to under 18 years old. So they'll go through a little safety skills course. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Information again. Mayor, Mr.
Can you
Mayor.
repeat the time and date of the event?
Thank you.
Time and date, yes. Saturday, September 12th from 10 to 2, and it will be held at the Pacific Community Center. And from there, the entrance will be actually Pacific Community Center, and then we'll be using the Edison Playground.
Are you running a PSA on GTV6? Would you like to run a PSA on GTV6? We can hook you up so that you can get this out to the community.
Sure. We've been posting it throughout the city's websites and various different places, and it's being advertised in the school systems and flyers. This is the flyer right here that's being brought out. Normally we'd be able to flash it up, but apparently special meeting we're not able to, but this is the flyer, and each one of you were given a flyer.
We'll put the flyer on the scroll on GTV6 too, so
Great.
it runs on there because our ratings are, we're way up there.
Well, great. Super. Thank you. Thank you. So please just continue to spread the word, and it's coming up in 12 days. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't have any other cards for this topic. And if there are no other comments, we thank the chief and Mr. Galanyan for your presentation. Let's move on to the next item. Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. Talking about water conservation, we'll have our GWP General Manager, Mr. Zern, talk about the drought and what goes along with that, probably ably assisted by Fire Chief Greg Fish when we get into the issue of El Nino and how that may impact us for the good and for some of the challenges that it may present. And then he'll be followed up by CDD Director Phil Lanzafame talking about the upcoming consideration. And just for the record, there is a very angry bird, the original Angry Bird that's going around the outside of the building. That's not somebody's cell phone telling them they have a message or status updating. That is a bird and apparently trying to break through the glass. So Mr. Lansdale will talk about updates that may be coming to the council as it pertains to turf and the front yard setback. So with that, Mr. Zern.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. As Chief Castro had indicated, we were up in this neighborhood not too long ago, about 6 weeks ago or so. So I'm going to go rather quickly through this because a lot of this is old information, except for the fact that our residents, all of you, continue to do an outstanding job, and our numbers continue to grow in conservation, which is just an excellent outcome. So these, you've seen these, you've heard these either from me or from staff. It's a very angry bird. And in the media, you've seen it. 2013, the driest year we have on record. 2014, the hottest year. In 2015, the lowest snowpack we've ever experienced in California. Reservoirs are down. All of this prompted the governor to issue an executive order calling for an overall 25% reduction statewide. Each agency was given a specific number based on their past performance. The City of Glendale was given 20% as our mandated goal. This is a snowpack for this year. So this is April 1st, 2015, and I'm not good enough to do this, but That
No, sir, I'm sorry. Is that really a bird? It's very distracting.
Is there a bird inside too? Because
Are there any ornithologists in the house?
Yeah, it's outside. Yeah, he's trying to come in.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Zern.
No worries.
You were saying the snowpack.
This dashed line is where the normal snowpack should be. They should be standing on that dashed line on the 1st of April of any average year. So not only are they not even close to that, I don't know if any of you, because I sure can't see any snow on the ground, period. So that's what we were facing. And the snowpack is very, very critical. The reservoirs being down is one thing. The snowpack is even more critical, and obviously the two in combination make it even more difficult. This is Lake Mead, and that's Hoover Dam. I point this out because this has a special significance to the city of Glendale. This is the lowest levels that Hoover Dam or Lake Mead have been at since the dam was built. This is right about the time that they almost closed the dam. First time in history, since the 1930s, they were going to close the dam. What's that mean? Well, there's other sources of water, obviously, but we're also a member of the Hoover Dam on the other side, the electrical side. We get about 6% of our energy from this facility. So that water doesn't go through. We got to find another place to get our electricity. And as I think I mentioned to you a couple weeks ago when we were given our power supply presentation, that's the cheapest energy we get. So that would have had a double financial impact to us. Luckily, this region experienced some late season rain in May and June, and they did not have to close the dam. What's our response been in Glendale? In May, Council moved to Phase 3 of our mandatory conservation ordinance. Phase 2 was put into effect last summer, last August. We moved into Phase 3 in May. The real critical, important part of this Phase 3, or difference I should say, is it takes irrigation, exterior irrigation from 3 days to 2 days. So we're now at Tuesday and Saturday, 10 minutes each station if you have a automatic irrigation system. And that significantly impacted, in a positive way, our conservation efforts. That was really a critical move. Here's our monthly water conservation. You see the bar graphs going down. The green and red lines are the average temperatures. So you see, back in December of 2014, January 2015, those where temperatures are low, consumption is low. That's normal pattern. It's colder, you use less water in your irrigation. But watch as the temperatures rise, what we've done in Glendale. We've continued to drop. So the hottest parts of the year, we're continuing to maintain right around 25, 26%. That is outstanding, just outstanding. Our June, July numbers reported to the Water Board, just under 26%. So, I mean, my compliments to the great work of our residents. It doesn't happen if they don't comply. And then we're looking at fines like a lot of other agencies are who can't get their residents to comply. But ours have done what's needed to be done. Not always easy to do, not always easy to look at your brown lawn and take all these other conservation efforts into effect in your home, but they've done outstanding. That's all I can say. Now, there had been some questions as I go out in the community about enforcement, and we have, to this point, not done any harsh enforcement in regards to citations or fines. We've used information and education, but we do have a number of folks who are just egregious offenders. For whatever reason, they are choosing not to. Not a lot, obviously, or we wouldn't be making those numbers, but we do have a few. So we have stepped up our enforcement activities. We have a number of our staff have been trained through the city attorney's office in the proper procedures. We will go out, we will document, and we will begin issuing fines to those who are, and I'm talking about, this is as many as 3 or 4 letters, door hangers, and direct contacts we've had with people who and we've offered to help. Can we help you reset your timer? Is there something else we can help you do? Can we give you some suggestions? The answer's been, no, I'm fine, and then we'll go back and find them again. And we have people out at, just so folks know, we have people out at 4, 5, 6 in the morning. That's when we find this. So I've got a whole crew of staff that comes in on a different shift and then documents all of this, and it goes with the citation per our direction from the city attorney's office. So when that citation goes out, we have pictorial evidence Plus, we have the history of our notification. Yes, ma'am.
And just to repeat something you said so that everybody understands it, that if you're like many people and have an irrigation system you don't know how to work because maybe you bought the house with it and it's been running by itself for 15 years and you just don't want to tangle with it, you'll help, right?
Yes.
So you will come out and you won't charge the residents?
No. We will send, and in fact, I've also talked with Mr. Duran because he really has irrigation specialists, and to the point that we can give pointers and tips. My staff has looked up on YouTube every YouTube how-to with every sprinkler timer we can find. And I'll tell you, it's not easy. We had a situation, I'm sorry, Jess, I'll tell a little tale out of school. We had a situation in City Hall where the watering was off. And the guys got in and found out the timer. It was just an old timer that had, just needed to click one way, but it happens to the best of us. So if you ask, we'll do everything we can to help you. And again, we have our Water Wasters Anonymous hotline at 550-4426, which you can call. And then the final thing, just as a reminder, because we sometimes will get calls on this, we are suspending the code enforcement for brown lawns and brown parkways. That's part of that code, but it goes hand in hand when the mandatory conservation goes into effect, so that folks who are compliant, we're not penalizing them in that particular regard. Now, in the depths of this worst drought we have had, we have growing predictions every day in the media about the upcoming El Nino, and that we may have one of the wettest seasons on record right around the corner, feast or famine. So what could El Nino mean for the U.S.? You see across the northern part of the country, mild weather, cooler weather in the south and Midwest and Southwest. Warmer up north, which is interesting, as that comes down, that concerns us too, because that could affect snowpack in the northern mountains. Dry here, again, snowpack issues, and then wet in our particular part of the world, or the United States. And so we can expect, as the predictions are growing, and we've heard a lot of different things. Climatologists are like weather reporters. We've heard it'll be anywhere from a moderate to severe, just a little moderate to severe, which is a huge range, quite frankly, when you're dealing with these kind of things. So as always, we will prepare for the worst. You've heard, I think there was an article in the Times that called it a Godzilla El Nino that was on its way. So nevertheless, we will, and then again here, sorry, bells and whistles that I'm not. So increased hurricane activity on our side of the coast, decreased hurricane activity on the East Coast, where normally that activity is standard. Here's another graph that just shows, this is the average water temperature. And you see the blue line is 1997, which is the most severe El Nino on record. Orange being 2015. So you can see it's tracking pretty well with that 97 event. In fact, it started off with even warmer water during this comparison. So again, we are preparing ourselves as a city for as strong as an event as it comes. And we are always prepared, but in this particular case, we always take that extra effort to make sure that we've got all of our T's crossed and I's dotted. So you're looking up there at that very strong El Nino. So basically, GWP and Public Works are preparing for the stormy weather, focusing on the infrastructure, hardening our targets, going to our weak points, and making sure that they're sustainable. All city departments. And I'm going to ask Chief Fish to come up and talk a little bit about this, because it's his responsibility to oversee all of the city departments and consolidate or coordinate those in our efforts. And the city will continue to disseminate information on weather predictions, sandbags, and we'll have a dedicated website coming up. But I'm going to let Chief Fish talk to you more specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Zern. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, you'll be happy to know that your city departments are in the planning process for what could be a very significant winter when it comes to rainfall. The El Nino has been predicted to be pretty big, as Mr. Zern pointed out. So what we're doing is we're hitting it multi-departmental. We have ISD. They're going to get the cameras up excuse me. They're getting the cameras up so that we can view the cameras over the critical areas where the rain might collect. The county is in the process of doing a determination of what debris basins need to be cleaned out on a priority basis. You'll be happy to know that our debris basins are in good shape right now, and we will be keeping an eye on those debris basins. One of the debris basins that is going to do its job for us, we feel, is the one right here off of Brand Park. If you remember in 2014, June 22nd, we had a 150-acre brush fire. Have not had a lot of rainfall since then, and so the vegetation has not come back on the hill, so that debris basin is something that we're going to be keeping an eye on. Additionally, we're going to be looking at new ways to get sandbags into the community. So we're looking at equipment that we can purchase that'll fill sandbags rapidly, and so when the community comes to us for sandbags, we'll be able to deploy them a lot faster, and hopefully that'll solve some of the problems. Along with K-rails, K-rail placement and strategic locations, if you know what K-rails are, those are the concrete barriers that we can put in place, and that will help us direct the rainfall and the debris flows in a way that will keep the damage to a minimum to any houses or property. And then finally, what we're going to be doing is we're dusting off, we've already dusted off our Emergency Operations Center, our EOC, in the basement of City Hall. We're making sure that everything's ship-shape, which it is right now, should a disaster on the El Nino front occur. So with that, I will give you back to Mr. Zern.
And Chief Fish is being modest. He's already cracking the whip. He's had us meeting. He's given us homework. We've got multiple assignments. So believe me, he is right on top of this, and we will support him in every way we can. And that's it for my drought response presentation. These are our standard social media and telephone numbers where you can reach us to ask us any other questions. We keep people posted on different events through these venues, and we will continue to interact with you as you need. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lanzafame.
Before we get Mr. Lanzafame, we have a couple questions.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So assuming that El Nino will come, what would that do to our drought, Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3? Is it going to be just for this year and next year we're going to have the same problem with our water conservation or water supplies? Or that's two-part question, that's one. Then second part is, what is the capacity of Verdugo Wash? Have you looked into it to see if it's a massive El Nino? What is the capacity of Verdugo Wash coming from La Carcena all the way down to LA River?
Mr. Garapetian, on your first question, it's a really good question. There are some experts some experts have said it would take 2 years of heavy rainfall for us to get back to an average situation. Now, I'm not sure that's the monster end-all El Niños, so we'll have to wait and see at the end of the rainy season how that goes. Again, the critical issue is going to be the snowpack. If we get a lot of snow and the snow sticks and it builds, that in and of itself could help us tremendously. Obviously, the reservoirs are going to take on additional water through the rains, probably hold that water as the temperatures will be mild, but it's really important to get the snowpack. So right now, there's a lot of vacillation between, will one very heavy season do it for us, or are we going to need more than one season? So for us, we're going to hold tight as we go through the winter season, because you'll see that as automatically a low usage year. And then reevaluate this as we emerge from the spring and see if we need to keep mandatory conservation in place, obviously coming back to you with a report on that, and then deciding where we want to go from there. But we'll really need to see how this turns out. There's a couple of anomalies involved in this particular El Nino that some people say could actually just make it flatten out, and we get nothing, and we just continue the way we are. It's called a blob, I believe, is how they refer to it. But it could very much damper the effects. So we'll really have to wait till we get out of the winter or spring rainy season and then reevaluate that. On your second question, it's been my experience in all the time I've been here that I have heard that LA River and Verdugo Wash, one's 100-year storm capacity, then it goes to 50-year storm capacity, then it's really only a 25-year storm capacity. All I can tell you is, having been here, and Mr. Galanian has been here as well, and seeing it through some of the worst rain that we've had in probably the last 10 years, it has performed magnificently. It has gotten high, but it has performed very, very well. And Mr. Galanian and his staff will again go through that procedure with flood control, looking at the debris basins that are draining in and making sure that all of that is well taken care of. But I can just tell you, based on history, both the river and Verdugo Wash have done very well.
Ms. Friedman.
Well, first, it's just talking about that. It's a shame that LA doesn't have its infrastructure in place to capture that water as it runs down the LA River and the Verdugo Wash instead of sending it out to the ocean. That's something that will hopefully happen at some point in the near future. But I just wanted to, I guess it's more of a comment that I think we've all seen this in the past, that people just need to be a little careful as we go into, through fire season and through our haste to remove landscaping because of water savings, that especially in the hillsides, we don't remove so much vegetation that when it does rain, and hopefully it will rain, we end up with mudslides everywhere. That vegetation performs an important function to hold the hillsides up. And for years in Glendale, I've seen people get overzealous with trimming in fire season and just pull everything out or cut things to the point where they can't survive. So just a friendly reminder that the vegetation is important to maintain for that very reason.
Excellent point, Ms. Friedman. And in fact, Mr. DeGhetto and Mr. Galani and staff have been taking those questions from some residents. Some have asked for some exemptions on the watering, so we've been looking at that and trying to maybe add a day for folks that have extreme hillside areas that could be in danger. So we're trying to help with folks in that manner as well. One last thing before I turn it over to Phil. I didn't have a slide on this, but it's something that's been in the a buzz of the last few days. Has to do with the drought rate that we implemented as a city. The drought rate is in line with mandatory conservation. It's tied directly to each phase. Mandatory is phase 2 through 5. It's tied to each phase, and its sole purpose is to levelize our revenues so that we can meet our fixed cost responsibilities. So regardless of the amount of water we use, we still have to maintain the reservoirs, the pipes, the valves, and we have to treat the water. And I'll tell you, in many cases, because there's less water going through all of those facilities, it requires even more work. Water treatment especially, because that's something we can never, ever back down on. So we're having to look even closer because water's sitting in the pipes and the reservoirs longer. So our treatment issues have actually increased. So we want to make sure that we cover those costs. Were we at the forefront in doing this? Yes, you were. You were. But let me also remind everybody, there was a 6-month moratorium when we first put this into effect to give people a chance to get used to the new rate structure. We put the phase 2 rate structure in March. We moved to phase 3 of the mandatory, but we did not move to phase 3 of the drought rate. We stayed at phase 2. It was our recommendation, and we thought that would levelize our revenue enough to get us through, and so far it has. We're a little low, but nothing to be alarmed about. So while other agencies may be behind us in putting some of these kind of drought charges into effect, and others will do what they traditionally do, which is once the drought's over and they go back and count up their revenue, they're going to turn around and raise the rates. That's what they'll do. That's the only way. They have to get that money back. So they'll just turn around and raise their constituents and their customers' rates. We got ahead of it by focusing just on conservation, just on the drought. And when you lift that mandatory conservation, the drought fee goes away. It is not in perpetuity.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Devine.
I thought there was an interesting kind of breakdown that was, I think, published in one of the newspapers that the average family uses 1,900 cubic feet of water per day, and they would see possibly a $14.25 a month raise. That's less than 48 cents a day on this drought fee. So for less than 50 cents a day, we are having our water, that precious water, delivered to our homes during this drought.
And maintaining the infrastructure
And
so that we
maintaining
don't
the
find ourselves like some of our neighbors who haven't maintained and paid attention to that. So,
Thank you. So let's get back to Mr. Lanzafame.
So while we're talking about drought, you can't help but think about artificial turf and as a solution, and the conversation that you had earlier this year. So I'm going to run through a lot of what we're doing right now in community development. You are aware because you asked us to do it, but more for the community here. Just to review, our existing regulations, 40% of your home, 40% of your lot needs to be planted with live material. In your landscaping, it can include pools and rock gardens. Then we have a separate limit, which is in your street setback, which is the first 25 feet. 50% needs to be live plant material. Artificial turf currently is allowed in the R1 zone, not in the hillside zones, but it must be in the backyard, not visible from the front. And then all new plant material must be drought tolerant. There's something that was a little bit new to me because I think drought tolerant succulents. In speaking to a landscape professional Saturday night, I realized that's actually not the case. We've had this in place for many years. You initiated a review of turf, but as part of that conversation, we started to look at those standards that we just talked about. Are the limits right? People are starting to plant with different materials, and some of it looks great, but does it fit our zoning code? And so you asked us to, you initiated that process. We wanted to fold the turf discussion in with that and bring it all back to you. It'll come back as a discussion, and then we'll go through the regular ordinance process, Planning Commission, then back to you. So see, these are some of the things that we're looking at right now. What are our current regulations? Should 50% of that front setback be live plant material? Should we require that? Or is something less than that more appropriate? Could it be more appropriate? We want to look at the entire turf question, from safety and aesthetics to installation, and so we'll have that as part of our report. How is turf evolving, if you will, to become better and better? And then, conversely, what hazards do we still see with that? We're looking at, if you did decide to allow turf beyond where we are, some quality parameters. Now, we put subject to state legislation here, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. There is actually a bill from Assemblymember Gatto that would prohibit us from restricting. I'll get to that in a bit. We also want to look at standards for installation. How do you put this together? You don't just roll it out on your front lawn and say, I'm good to go. So we want to see, are there standards that we should embed in whatever policy we come up with? And then last, impose a state model ordinance. This is an ordinance, we have chosen to take a route that was available to us to say it all needs to be drought tolerant planting. There is a model ordinance now that would actually have you test soil and collect water and some other things. We're not sure that we have the staff to enforce this type of thing. So we'll get into that topic with you. Some of the changes, the ones that are really dramatic is, do we reduce the percentage of live plant material? We saw we saw one example, and I'll show it here, where it was a very nice yard and it was well maintained, but there wasn't anywhere close to 50%. We're also looking at allowances. Drought-tolerant plants take longer to grow and fully develop, as opposed to the instant lawn, where now you can take real turf and literally roll it out. So I want to just go through some images that would talk about some of the ranges that we could look at. This is drought-tolerant landscaping. As you see, I don't think there's any succulents, maybe this one down here. But these are plants that you see all over in Glendale. Certainly more than 50% coverage, almost 100%, it looks like. This is something less than 50%, but looks very nice. If you like this kind of planting and properly spaced, that's a no from Mr. Garpetian, I'll take it. Here's the property that kind of raised this conversation. We saw this picture in the news press. Clearly not 50%, but again, may be suitable for somebody's taste. And the question for you, and that we'll bring back, is how much of that should be live plant material? You have the dry riverbed look. Steve is not the only one saying brown is the new green. We're looking at that here. Brown really is the new green here, and this may be something that just definitely isn't something supportable. where you just have bark out in the front, and that's that. So this is kind of a range of things from 100% coverage to really nothing, and probably something that you may say is unacceptable. Grass doesn't have to be the traditional front lawn. There are drought-tolerant grasses that are out there, as well as the marguerite, which is a nice ground cover plant. Talked about this assembly bill from Assemblymember Gatto. It is headed to the floor now, and it says it greatly expands the right to use artificial turf. What it does is it prohibits cities, local government, from prohibiting artificial turf. Even the language that's there, it may restrict our ability to set standards on artificial turf for aesthetics. One of the main things there is you can't make it so onerous that a person couldn't put in artificial turf. So these are some of the things that we would like to be able to do if you decide to allow an expansion of artificial turf. We'd like to maybe have some standards put in place. We're keeping an eye on this bill to see how it would affect that decision that you ultimately will make. And then last, we'll come back to you in mid-October with our full report. We'll take your direction, incorporate that into an ordinance. If you want to change that, we'll incorporate it into an ordinance. Planning Commission, then back to you. That's as far as we are on turf. So any questions? We have staff and certainly here to answer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lanzafame. Is there any other presenter on this particular topic? I do have a card from the public, Dr. Yvette Hovsepian-Bierce. Hello? You can get the microphone. There you go.
Good evening, Mayor Najarian and City Council members and Glendaleians. I'm Dr. Yvette Hovsepian-Bierce. I'm appearing here on behalf of my son Jeremiah, who is the founder of Jeremiah's Bucket Campaign. As Mayor Najarian knows, Jeremiah was 14 when he founded Jeremiah's Bucket Campaign, which is just a very simple water preservation tool. He responded back then to Governor Schwarzenegger's severe warnings for a severe drought in California. So he started his citywide campaign, which the city council members and the mayor and also Glendale Water and Power representatives embraced it and included Jeremiah's tool in the 10 water-saving tools, and is posted on Glendale Water and Power's website. So Jeremiah asked me tonight to come here and appear on his behalf and just remind everyone that be vigilant in saving water, and just remind everyone that his tool is very simple. All one needs is a bucket or a bowl. And the idea is that while to place a bucket in the shower, so when waiting for the water to warm up, just capture that water, that cold water. And in our house, usually when we do that, each person collects about 3 to 4 gallons of water each time before a shower, and we use that water to either water the plants, flowers, or even at the sink. I actually put a cup there and I use it to brush my teeth. Instead of turning on the sink, I just use the bucket water. Or when I just want to wash my face, we even use it for flushing the toilet, and so also for cleaning the house. The other thing that we do is in the kitchen, we put either a small bucket or a bowl in the kitchen sink, and we capture the water when we're washing fruits and vegetables. And again, use that water for watering plants and using for cleaning purposes. So just wanted to encourage everyone. It's just a behavior change. And it's very difficult sometimes to make changes, but it's very easy tool. So thank you so much for your contributions to water saving.
Thank you very much, and give Jeremiah our regards.
Can I comment?
Yes.
Congratulations to Jeremiah. I think that's a great project. I just had a conversation with Steve Zern before this meeting. A resident had suggested to me that the water department can give out perhaps free little buckets that will fit in our sinks, because a lot of times a bucket in the shower is an easy thing to do. But how many of us want to have a bucket or something near our sinks to save the water? So he's going to look into maybe the Department of Water and Power finding some small, cute bucket that we can give out to residents. And I think we could save a lot of water that way. So I hope Mr. Zern will carry through on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir.
Next topic.
We hit to the next to home stretch here. We'll have a very brief presentation on upcoming infrastructure projects impacting Northwest Glendale from Mr. Golanian and Mr. Zern.
All right, thank you. Thank you. This presentation is about an $8 million investment in critical infrastructure along Pacific Avenue and Bridges Street in northwest part of Glendale. And I've borrowed the title of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly from the famous old Western movie and reused by Mr. Ochoa because it only describes the process of a construction project perfectly. So here's the ugly part. About 3 years ago, we sealed the cracks along Pacific and Burchett to preserve what was left of the pavement and prevent further deterioration. It had reached a point now that it needs complete resurfacing, and you can see ponding along the gutter. The bad part is the project impacts. These are unavoidable, unfortunately, comes with construction. It will include lane closures, which will cause minor traffic delays. These will be temporary closures, and they're obviously the unavoidable construction, noise, and dust. We'll obviously do our best with our contractor to minimize and mitigate these impacts as best as we can, but we ask the residents and the business owners to be patient while we go through the process. The schedule is that we started a couple of weeks ago, primarily at the intersection of Pacific and Burchett. This work will go on until mid-November, then we'll suspend the project, button it up, make it safe, come back after the holidays, start in January, and it will go on probably until October, November of 2016. The project spans all the way on the south from Colorado Street to the north, Glen Oaks Boulevard. The lime green line represents sewer replacement. The red is street and traffic signal improvements, and that purple line is a reconstruction of an alley off of Burchett. The scope includes, of course, asphalt replacement, repair of sidewalks, curbs, gutters, driveway, and alley approaches, installation of new or reconstruction of curb ramps, tree replacement, installation of new fiber optic system, the replacement of sewer mains that have been damaged or old. They were originally installed in the 20s and they're undersized. We'll be installing approximately 2,900 feet of 15-inch and 18-inch lines at a cost of about $1.5 million, $1.5 million. The traffic signal modifications I talked about earlier will take place at 10 intersections: Colorado, Broadway, Wilson, California, Lexington, Doran, the 134 freeway eastbound and westbound on and off ramps, Burchett, and Glen Oaks Boulevard. The good is the long-term benefits. We will have a new environmentally friendly rubberized pavement. It will provide a quieter and smoother ride, and it will last for at least another 25 years. It will provide for safer pedestrian crossings, less tripping hazards, of course. The ramps will be in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It will provide for proper drainage and no more ponding. It will have upgraded and higher capacity sewer pipes. It will have new pavement markings, 35 new trees, and of course, signal synchronization for better traffic flow. As part of the project, we will realign the intersection at Broadway and Pacific for better visibility. The good is the finished product you see. This is a recently completed project on Glendale Avenue, or award-winning project of Glendale Avenue. You see the markings, the upgraded signal lights, and the new pavement, and the ADA curb ramps. I wanted to briefly talk about the San Fernando Road Quiet Zone, not part of that project, since it was mentioned in the news press as being on the agenda. As you know, we completed extensive safety improvements at Sonora, Grandview, and Flower crossings at the railroad. This is a multi-jurisdictional function that includes MetroLink, California Public Utilities Commission, the Federal Railroad Authority, and of course the City of Glendale. We have had several field review meetings with all these representatives at all three crossings and completed 18 milestones that were required by MetroLink. We are in the process of completing some minor striping and signage. But at the 11th hour, the CPUC has made a requirement for the installation of 3 backflashers. These are additional precautionary lights that will go on for pedestrians attempting to cross the tracks. They will cost $50,000 each. They will be designed and installed by MetroLink, and we're currently working with Metro staff to try to find the funding in the amount of $150,000 that we've been told staff is planning to take to the Metro board in October. That concludes my presentation.
We'll get them. Ms. Friedman.
Well, first, those are some expensive flashing lights. So I have a question about the road work. 3 questions. The first question, can anything be done about the constant bottlenecking when Pacific goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane crossing Glen Oaks? Going north.
Council Member Friedman, unfortunately, due to lack of public right-of-way, that is going to be extremely difficult, if not
south
impossible.
is what, I mean, Pacific is one of the most congested streets in the whole area.
I completely...
Partially because you've got these schools there, right? So people drop their kids off and pick them up sometimes on Pacific, or they're going to and from the schools. I know we have to do the road work. We need to really figure out a way that we're going to get people that are going to the schools through there so that residents can still get to the highway. So detour signs that get people onto other streets, how are people getting to... There are people that can't always stay off Pacific forever during that time. So I'm very concerned about what's going to happen to the surrounding streets, to Highland, to the traffic in general. So I know you've got signs up now warning people, which is good. I'm just not sure what the alternative is for people who have to go to the schools there and other places. So I'd like to see what the traffic pattern plan is, if there is such a thing. Secondly, in terms of the new construction, I have 2 questions. The first is, will those be done in accordance with our Complete Streets program? And secondly, are we going to be using technologies that will help retain water in that surrounding area so that we're not, again, rushing more of our rainwater to the LA River and to the ocean?
Thank you, Councilmember Friedman. I completely agree with you regarding the bottleneck at Pacific and Glen Oaks. Our hope and expectation is with the new traffic signal system upgrades that we can time and program it better for more free flow when there are bottlenecks, especially at peak hours. That will give us that flexibility.
And the highway, of course, is another one going south in the mornings.
As far as notification, we are currently working on a program that will have on-the-fly detour information on our website, which will show closures, we will show detours, as well as signage on the street. We will have all of that information disseminated to the residents and the property owners and the businesses. It is our attempt, as much as we can, to pave the street in the neighborhoods that have schools during the summer break. So that is our ultimate plan. But if not, we have been working with schools around in the neighborhood to find the least intrusive method. Maybe we'll start work after the drop-off hours and finish before pickup and disseminate that information to the parents through the PTA. As far as the storm management, the right-of-way on Pacific doesn't allow for installation of the bioswales that we're planning for Monterey and 134 and Harvard Street. However, we are not making any modifications to existing drainage. They don't have huge channels or catch basins that captures water and flows it to the channels or the vertigo wash immediately. Most of the flow happens on street, but every opportunity that we have to capture and manage it and use it for the new 35 trees that we plant, will take advantage of that.
And complete streets?
Complete street, thank you. Over the last few years, during the design of any project, street reconstruction project that we have done, we have always, not always, recent years, considered complete street strategy. It has included facilities for pedestrians, bicyclists, in accordance with our bicycle master plan, transit users. We are upgrading our bus stops, installing bus pads, providing more access for disabled people to use the buses, as well as vegetation and trees, and of course the environmental friendly method of the new pavement.
Thank you.
Ms. Devine.
So there will be, you're going to have bike sharrows, or you're going to have the bike lanes, or what will be on Pacific for
Councilmember
cyclists?
Devine, due to the narrow width of Pacific, the bicycle master plan doesn't call for dedicated bike lanes. However, we will install sharrows.
Okay. And my second comment, very briefly, congratulations on the quiet zone on San Fernando. I know you've been trying for that for about 10 years now, correct? So congratulations. I know the people that live there near the trains are ecstatic. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zern.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'll give you very brief. We've got two significant projects that are underway right now. Both of them have direct impacts in this particular part of the city. The first is a rebuilding and upgrade, repowering of the Grandview substation. Substation was originally built in the 30s, and while this facility is in the 1600 block of San Fernando Road, it pushes power this far north. And as part of our redundant reliability system, it's important that we upgrade this facility to make sure that we are always reliable in this part of town as well. The upgrade is necessary to accommodate anticipated growth, to enhance reliability, as I said, to improve our redundancy, and we've got more customers that are current living that have both commercial and residential since that facility was originally built. The renovation includes a new enclosure, and this is really kind of the real good part of it, because it's the part you'll see. It's an aesthetic feature and an upgrade. It's also a safety and security feature. As I'm sure you have seen, substations are generally open. They're kind of ugly, but they're also very risky when it comes to security. You can simply throw something over the fence, or as we've had in certain parts of the country in this state, people just taking a random shot at the facility, and they can put people in the dark for a long, long time. Go through the technical part. Those are all of the upgrades from the voltage. The project is underway right now, will be completed in August of next year, so it's a long, arduous process. $16 million project. And unlike Public Works, there is no dust, noise, or inconvenience on this project. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But the good news is most of that's out of the way. This facility is, as we do most of the work on site and within the building now, we've done the street work, so in that busy corridor of San Fernando, I think we've been able to mitigate the impact. On the left, you're seeing three different views of the existing facility. Again, as I say, you can see the exposed racks. You see it from the street in one direction, from the other direction, and then from the railroad tracks on the backside. On the right side, you see what it's proposed to look like when we're done. So we close it all in. We take a historic featured building and continue that theme down the street as we enclose it. It even looks good from the back railroad side. We're also going to put part of our GIS and SCADA system housed here, and this is also a facility we're going to test battery storage at. So as soon as it's built, we have room in there to bring batteries in and begin to test the feasibility of more battery storage as part of our overall system. Second project's a water project. It's the Kenneth Road and Ben Lomond water main replacement project. So this is part of our continuing upgrade of our distribution system. Again, you're looking at replacement of existing 4-inch cast iron pipe, some of it 90 years old. We're going to put 11,340 lineal feet of new pipe in, and with that, all the appurtenances that go with it, valves and connections and so forth. Project will start hopefully in the next couple of weeks and go till June of next year. And this project cost is between $3.1 and $3.6 million. It's a design build project, our third one in our water rebuild project. The first two have turned out really well, and we expect this to do the same. Here's a map of the areas. You see Kenneth is in red. That's the main portion of it. And then on the green are the side streets where we're making the connections and making sure that flow, pressure, the hydrants are all improved in this particular area. So that's it. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Zern.
And for what it's worth, we will be repaving the street, obviously, when we're done.
Oh, yeah. I have a deal with the director. I'm repaving all kinds of street for this guy. I'm telling you, no. As part of what we do, I think it's important that was a gap that there was between the departments in the past, and I think we've closed that. So we will be doing a lot of complete repaving. So you don't see pipe trench repavements down an older street. We're trying to do as much gutter line to gutter line, or at least center line to gutter line as we can. So.
Thank you. I have a card from Louise Peebles. Oh, thank you. Mr. Ochoa, did you have a comment?
That was it, sir. We're ready for the last item if you're ready.
Okay, very well. Let's move along.
To give an update of what's coming down the line next year by way of the community planning process, Phil Lansfame will give you a very brief overview.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I promise no dust, no torn up streets. I will ask these guys to repave anything that we do. But we want to give you a quick update on community plans and what they are. There's been a lot of discussion in Glendale for some time now about development. And so we really wanted to talk to you about the next phase of planning for community development. We've done the grand gesture in downtown. We've set that with the downtown specific plan. We worked on the San Fernando Road corridor, and so now it's time to get into the community planning. We'll be using these plans to update our general plan, and we'll go around, we'll split the city up into 4 quadrants, and we'll use these plans as a means to update our general plan, so we're not scrambling, every 10 years and saying, oh, got to get to it. The purpose of the plans really are to get into neighborhoods and find out what is it people want. What is the vision they have for those specific areas? As I said, we did this in the downtown, big area, but we want to really get into neighborhoods and find out what would you like to see? How would you like to see your neighborhood develop and evolve? And we'll talk about the different types of ways that can happen. We are looking at things that we did in the past, and we're building on that, using that as a foundation to move forward. We've had several planning exercises that will use the information that we garnered. We even have different committees set up that we may want to tap into again. As part of this visioning process, we'll update guidelines and zoning standards. We'll ask you to then achieve that vision that the community gives to us. And then each one is customized to a different segment of the city. For example, we have these 4 community plans. We did the North Plan already. That was up Foothill area, up north, Montrose, Foothill, Lowell, between Lowell and Pennsylvania there. We are currently underway in the South Plan. We hope to have a draft of that back by the end of the year. This is one of the projects where we'll be coming back to you, asking you for different alternatives that we should study in our environmental impact report that goes along with this. So we'll start to set those development ideas and policies. Future plans of interest to this group here, the East and West Glendale plan will follow right after South. We'll probably do West first. We're trying to figure what's the right cutoff. We don't want to take it right up the middle of Brand because Brand should all be done together. So that either falls to the east or the west. And we'll do that. But we anticipate finishing the South Plan sometime early 2016. We'll roll right into the West Plan. One of the things that we're looking at now in the South Plan is to update a lot of city-wide models, specifically our traffic model. And then we'll have that prepared and ready to go, so these future plans should go much more quickly. When we do the plan, we start with the neighborhood and we ask and look at what are specific neighborhoods. We have a book of where they're all listed, but sometimes they don't fall within those exact boundaries. So we want to identify unique neighborhoods and business districts in each of those plan areas. We want to find out, again, what is the community's vision for the next 15 to 20 years, and then articulate that in development character. So you see here, this was the North Glendale plan. We've got the different areas. Those were different neighborhoods and districts that we approached individually. The top there, the header says vision equals degree of change. So depending on the vision that people want to see for their community in the plan, it could take on one of these four elements. Conserve is really limited to the hillsides. And so you wouldn't do that, and you wouldn't have that in flat areas. But it certainly could be something that is as defined by staff, by council, by the community, something to conserve. Maintain is pretty much status quo. Let's just make sure that we like things just the way they are. Let's keep them that way. Make sure that we maintain quality. Enhance is, I like the feel of it. Like these few things a little bit better, but for the most part, it's okay. Transform is really taking an area and making something different. In North Glendale, as an example, in working with the community, we mapped out these different areas. They were just the three. Conserve, we were in the hillsides, so we wanted to make sure that those mountain areas were conserved. The residential, we'd like it just the way it is. Don't do anything with it. Some of the commercial corridors along Foothill, we'd like to see some enhancement. We would like to see different types of business there. I said that we use other planning studies as foundations. This is in the South Glendale area. From our previous planning exercises, we were able to identify these neighborhoods and these areas of concentration: maintain, enhance, transform. Each of those colors represents a different element, whether you're maintaining, transforming, or enhancing. We also talked about zoning standards going along with the plan. So how do you implement the vision? This is an example from the North Plan along Foothill Boulevard. It slopes down towards downtown. So we wanted to see, here's what you see at the street. Here's how far you pull it back. Here's what you can do in the back. We want to make sure that people that are downslope aren't looking at some kind of monstrous thing. So we establish standards to help implement that vision. For this group, again, timing, we'll be doing this just as soon as we finish the South Plan. We'll roll into the West Plan. We believe that will start sometime mid-2016 once we finish up. We will be here asking you all to come to different meetings. Community participation, engagement is critical if this is really going to work, because you need to identify the vision that you would like to see. That completes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lanzafame. I don't have any cards on this particular item. Are there any comments by council? Well, Mr. Ochoa, that concludes our business for the evening.
Yes, sir. We want to make sure we give as much information as we can on items that are relevant to these respective neighborhoods, as was the vision of the council and specifically then Mayor Sinanian, and I think we're doing that. We do have upcoming, we will continue this effort generally in the last month of each quarter. Council will be out in your neighborhood. So up next will be in the east. in December of this calendar year. And I believe you're looking at a flyer for another effort by the City Council, if you want to talk about that.
Yes, this is another special meeting of the Glendale City Council, the Work Boot Tuesday, which will be held Tuesday, September 15th at 3 p.m. at the Shoal Canyon Landfill, which is up Glen Oaks Boulevard through the neighborhood and up to the very top. We'll have parking available. We are going to be discussing the Shoal Canyon Landfill, its past, its present, and its future. And this has been an high interest item in the past. We are going to be inviting all the residents and citizens of Glendale to attend. We hope to get some answers. Wear comfortable shoes. We will be walking through the environs of the landfill.
In a very safe and liability-free way.
Yes. So please join us next. Not next Tuesday. We'll be dark because of the celebration of Labor Day, but the weekend after. So in 2 weeks, September 15th, 3 p.m. up at Shoal Canyon is our Work Boot Tuesday. Please join us.
I think this really speaks to the council's priority of an engaged and informed community, that you will be here in the different neighborhoods as part of city council in your neighborhood, but also be out edifying yourselves and giving the community members the opportunity to go kick the tires on everything from infrastructure to parks to transit systems and everything else that the city does. You've been to the EMS system with our hospital partners, to the police station, and the idea is, as development by the council's direction has slowed down, you still have the opportunity to get out into the community. So again, if one of your priorities is informed and engaged community, here you are in the community to make yourself, as well as the community, informed and engaged. So we thank you as your staff, and certainly we thank the community for coming out tonight.
Yes. Mr. Sinani?
Just quickly, on that note, I want to thank the community for coming out because, like you said, they're the ones that we do this for, and without their participation, their presence, these meetings would not be successful. So thank you. Thanks all our neighbors, Northwest residents, and not North. I see a lot of people who are not from the Northwest who are here. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
We are adjourned.